With Return to Yharnam coinciding with the PS Plus free Bloodborne month, Yharnam has just been a bustling hub of activity. And I'm sure you've noticed, put out several invasion videos for Bloodborne. But despite that, the prevalent Bloodborne PvP sucks mentality still does exist. So, just like with Dark Souls 3 and invasions suck in Dark Souls 3 and invasions are too hard, like that mentality before it, I'm late to the party with Bloodborne, obviously, but I can do what I can do to sort of try and change that mindset a little bit if possible. Now, just like Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne is actually the game that introduced the you summoned help, you get an invader possibility. You will always be faced against multiple opponents, as I am here. We had a brief little skirmish trying to out-cheese each other through the doorway there. This sort of thing is what your typical Bloodborne invasion will look like. Right off the bat, this is going to get rid of about 40% of players who don't feel like this is fair, and they just want to basically grief other players. FromSoft seems to have taken the mentality of removing the griefer aspect from invasions, and in Bloodborne it is more difficult, so you lose like a big chunk of people. So if you want to invade in Bloodborne, you're going to have to put some work into it. It doesn't have to be like, you know, going and farming the greatest gems. You don't have to do any of that stuff. There are plenty of gems you can find in the base game and in the DLC that will serve your purposes just fine for this sort of thing. The weapon I'm using right now is, if I'm not mistaken, this is like a nerfed version of my typical. I have two Holy Moonlight swords. One's got like nerfed kind of gems in it, and the other one's got really, you know, decent gems in it. Still not anything that I had to farm over and over in Chalice dungeons for. We can just completely remove that meme from the equation. Now, if you want to one-shot people, if you want to never lose an invasion ever, then yes, you're gonna need to go get those gems. But if you're just looking for 3v1 mayhem, this is the place to get it. The first thing that you should note, one of the best things about Bloodborne invasions is you're rewarded for these invasions. When you win an invasion, you gain insight. You can spend insight at the messenger bath, and you can use it to buy items that help you in invasions. Crazy, right? Imagine if you could turn in, 10 Pale Tongues to Rosaria and get, a divine blessing. Imagine what that would, you know what I mean? That's lunacy. That's fantastic. That's what Bloodborne allows you to do. I turn in my insight, I buy lead elixirs. It's basically perseverance that lasts for a really long time. But it comes with the trade-off of not being able to move. You saw me there use a blue elixir, which turns me invisible, and I was able to get a backstab and almost kill two members of this party with one single backstab. It outright deleted one, and then it put me in position to win the invasion. Because I've won the invasion, I get the insight back, I can go back to the Bath Messengers, and I can buy more of this item. How clever is that? So, these items you find at the Bath Messengers, spend your insight on them. Or, you can farm it up, and you can, hoard it and turn around and buy weapon upgrade materials with it. It's great. But those items are really handy. Now let's talk a little bit about the weapon upgrade, since I mentioned the weapon upgrade materials. Bloodborne does not do weapon upgrade matchmaking, which means you can take your plus 10 weapon, to old Yharnam, where most people are like level 31 with plus 2 or 3 weapons. You can go down there and just absolutely wreck the place up if you want. It's, entirely up to you. Now, like I said, I keep like a nerfed version of my weapons on me, because at a certain point it stops being fun when you're seriously, you can two-shot players, even with bad gems. It's like I can 2 or 3 shot players who didn't level their vitality. And that's not fun for me, so why do it? So I keep like a nerf version of my weapons on me, just for that sort of situation. But always keep in mind that you can have that plus 10 gemmed out doomsday weapon, as Skidder the Tryhard called it, and you can, you know, mutually assured destruction against a gank squad. How do gank squads win? How do co-opers win in invasions? The answer is stun lock. Guns have stun lock. Every weapon has some bit of stun on it. Now it's just a touch, but it's not like Dark Souls 3 where you slowly start to unstun lock. Look at this guy, he's trying to ring his bell. It's still ringing. He's coming straight out of Lothric. He doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing. Just a side note and funny. Back to the point at hand. Dark Souls 3, the more you hit something, the less stun is on the follow-up attack. Not so in Bloodborne. So when you run into people who just fucking blend you up, you just get blended up, and that's it. That's how they beat you. And there's not really anything you can do about it. I mean, you know, you can try and beast roar out, you can try and swing, you can hope your weapon is faster than theirs, you can hope that, you know, you use a blood vial and you get a little bit of poise for it, and maybe you can get away that way or something, you know. But that's how the co-opers win. They basically just team up and they just gank your shit in. That's how they win. How do they win in Dark Souls 3? The exact same way. The co-opers just gang up on the invader. That's the best way to play. That's the smart way to play. What makes Bloodborne different, though? Well, in Bloodborne, you can, 1, heal parries, which is not as hard as most people make it out to be. Everybody complains about the netcode, but it's not really about the netcode, it's about prediction. It's when your opponent does 2 back dashes after you've done half of his health, what do you think he's trying to do? Probably heal, right? Right. Now, that's a good time to, you know, try a heal parry. You might get it. So, Dark Souls 3, they tried to even the odds a little bit by giving the invaders a teammate. If a dried finger is active, you can have a teammate. Now, that's never going to happen in Bloodborne. I say never, I'm lying. 99.99% of the time, it won't happen. You can have 2 invaders. It's just that it doesn't work the same way. In Dark Souls 3, covenants don't mean anything and are all absolute trash. In Bloodborne, they kind of mean something and are only partly trash. So, I say that because only 1 covenant in Bloodborne gets any sort of reward for doing PvP, and only 1 gets a reward for, you know, helping somebody beat a boss. But here in my world, we see there are 2 invaders. One is an adversary, and the other is just a regular invader. What's the difference? An adversary is someone who's wearing the opposite of my covenant. I am wearing the Radiance covenant. So anybody who's wearing the Corruption covenant is going to be my enemy. So Tony down here is my enemy. He got summoned in as a friend. Imagine if you picked up a summon sign in Dark Souls 3, and it, you know, it was a white summon sign. It was, you know, just a white, normal, friendly summon sign. And when you picked it up, all of a sudden, the guy that came out of it was, you know, trying to hurt you. Not like a mound maker, because mound makers can choose what they do. Adversaries don't get the choice. An adversary can only hurt the host. He can't hurt the enemies. But there is friendly fire between himself and the other invader. So you can see he and the other invader are having to play it safe and be careful with each other. So what I'm trying to do is split them up. You know, got the 2v1 going on. Fun. It's good fun. Nothing quite like it. This is Miyazaki's true vision right here. And why play lesser game modes? So, in Bloodborne, you're not going to get, you know, any invader backup. So just immediately get that out of your head. 99% of the time, it's just not going to happen. Because you're not doing meta level invasions where people have already unlocked the runes necessary for covenants. I mean, you can do meta level invasions, but they're going to be much slower to find than doing level appropriate invasions. When I say level appropriate invasions, I mean you're at a soul level that makes sense for the area you're trying to invade. Area level appropriate invasions, right? Now, down in the Chalice dungeons, it's a totally different story. At meta level, it's a totally different story. All kinds of wacky shit can happen down there, and up there at the meta level. But for the most part, I'm doing level appropriate invasions. Area level appropriate. So Dark Souls gave you that as an invader to try and help even the odds. If there's a dried finger active, you're going to have a teammate. Not so in Bloodborne, so don't count on having a teammate. So how do you win against the bonfire campers, the bond lantern campers, the lamp campers? How do you win against these people? You bring superior numbers, you have better firepower, you have better weapons, etc., etc. That's how you win. You just go down there with your plus 10 gemmed out doomsday weapon, and you just raffle stomp everybody's dick into that fine, fine waffle sauce. Now, Dark Souls 3. Parries, backstabs play an important role in invasions. A lot of people base their entire playstyle around it. And then there's this idea that you're never going to get a backstab in Bloodborne. Not necessarily the case. There are phantom backstabs in Bloodborne, where latency shows that you got a backstab on your screen, but on your opponent's screen, it doesn't look like it. However, they still get backstabbed. In this situation, that's just an honest-to-God backstab. You saw the damage pop up. They got put in that prone position, and I was able to backstab them. If it's a phantom backstab, they won't take any damage. They'll just go down in the prone position where you can backstab them. And the backstab, of course, will actually do damage. The visceral will actually do damage. The backstab setup, the fully charged R2, that won't do any damage at all. But just like with Dark Souls 3, you're going to have people who just want to run around after you invade them, and what you have to do, that's a phantom backstab. Notice I didn't take any damage. So what you're going to want to do is find a weapon that suits your build, that is good at chasing people down. For my arcane build, I like to use the Tonitrus. For a dex build, you could use something like the Blades of Mercy, or the Beast Hunter Safe, whatever. It's Arabic for sword. We're just calling it sword. You can use the Beast Hunter sword. On a strength build, you could still go with Tonitrus if you wanted to. The wheel also works. But this is where things get interesting in the weapons category, right? There's nothing like this in Dark Souls 3. You see me using the Holy Moonlight Sword most of the time. And what's so great about the Holy Moonlight Sword is it literally has a poise button. It has one attack on there that just gives me all kinds of poise. Ludwig's Holy Blade has the same button. Kirkhammer has the same button. Every weapon has a fully charged R2 that has poise. Like, honest to God, almost true poise can't be interrupted, I don't think. That level of poise. So much poise that if it can be interrupted, it's not even worth thinking about because it happens so infrequently. Fully charged R2s. Every weapon has this. Even stuff like Blades of Mercy, which is just a dagger. Imagine if the daggers in Dark Souls 3, if you fully charged the R2, imagine if it had poise, how it might change the combat up a little bit. It's the same here. You're going to get hit by multiple people a lot of the time in Bloodborne invasions. So you want something that's going to give you that level of hyper armor real quick, almost like it's in a can. And every weapon has that. You just have to play around and find it. Now, in a game with, 4 weapons like Bloodborne, I'm obviously joking, but I'm not going to go through every weapon and do like a build showcase, like what weapons get hyper armor, when, etc., etc. But you can learn it. For example, take someone who plays mainly with the wheel or the Blades of Mercy or the Cost Parasite, and you'll see a lot of quick step R1s in their repertoire because it's a very good attack and it does a lot of damage. Because it's easy and it does a lot of damage. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of nuance that's lost in Bloodborne PvP. I think basically just because it required people to actually look for it, and not many people took the time to do so. But if you want to get into invading in Bloodborne, this is one of the first things I would recommend you do, is get to know your weapon. What weapon are you using? Check out everything that it has available to it. The Blade of Mercy, if you've noticed in my videos, I'm a big, huge fan of the charged R2 into the L1. And the reason I like it so much is because the charged R2 gets the hyper armor, then it does a lot of stun, it has a lot of stagger on the attack, and then the L1, if the person doesn't try to just immediately dash out, if there's any hesitation, if they try and attack, if they try and do anything other than dash out, the L1 is going to do a lot of damage because transformation attacks do have a lot of damage on them. Moreover, they also do a lot of stagger, so it opens you up for more follow-up attacks. So the fully charged R1 into the L1 into the R1 with the Blades of Mercy. Combos, things like that. Now, mind you, these aren't true combos. There are not a lot of true combos in Bloodborne. You can play around, you can find them out, but it's not like Dark Souls 3 where you press R1 once and then you get another gimme R1. Or then, depending on what weapon you're using, you can use something like the Split Leaf and just never let somebody out of stun lock until your stamina bar is completely depleted. It's not like that. You don't get the gimme. You have to actually earn it, and you're rewarded for trying different things, for trying different stuff. What's great about that is it also looks pretty. It also looks very good, and you're not just sitting there mashing R1 and spamming R1. In Dark Souls 3, when I fight against someone and they're using a straight sword and they mash R1, I don't get mad at the player, I get mad at the game, because the player's just doing the right thing. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing because it works. It's actually effective. In Bloodborne, when you fight someone who just mashes R1, I don't get mad at the game, I get mad at the player. It's much easier to escape R1 mashing in Bloodborne than it is Dark Souls 3. It's not as good. It's not as good a tactic. Now, something like the Blades of Mercy has, a really great R1, 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 R1. You can use it, and that's fine, but not every weapon has that. Most weapons benefit from R1, L1, or R2, L1. L2, R1 is like its own move for some weapons. L1 sets up the weapon transformation, then you can press R1 and start a special attack that otherwise you can't do. You'll see me do that with the Kirk Hammer and the Ludwig's Holy Blade. So when you actually pick a weapon in Bloodborne, you can sit there and you can play with it, and it does more than just R1. What's great about Bloodborne is most weapons have an R1, 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 and all three of those attacks will be slightly different. Like with the straight sword, for example, it's slash, slash, thrust. But, and more importantly, you have all these other combinations where you can R1 into a different button, or R2 into a different button, and it actually does stuff. A lot of the people who complain about Dark Souls 2 having done combat right, with R2s comboing into other R2s, or R2s making R1s more fast subsequent R1s. So let's say you pressed R2 then pressed R1. The R1 would be faster than had you just pressed R1 by itself without the startup R2. People will complain and say, man, that was so good. That was so good. Why didn't they continue with that? There's something very much like that in Bloodborne that just people don't really take into consideration. And a lot of people talk about the netcode and how the netcode's not great. And that's true. There's not anything I can do that's going to change your mind, because you're just right when you say the netcode in Bloodborne is bad. But the people who refuse to see how fun, or people who don't see how fun that this can be, or they haven't yet understood how it works, you're missing out on quite a lot. I know some people complain and say, well, the netcode's just so bad, so it's bad. And really, it's a lot like Dark Souls 1 PvP, where it's more of a guessing game. There's way more prediction in this than there is in Dark Souls 3, where the netcode is really good. Don't get me wrong, I wish we had the good netcode. When Shadows Die Twice or whatever comes out, if it's got Bloodborne style combat with Dark Souls 3 style netcode, maybe even a better netcode, a more improved netcode, I mean, we're going to be talking about potentially what could be like one of the best games ever. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's not let hype, let's rein it in a bit, is what I'm saying. But there's nothing you can't get around with Bloodborne's netcode. You can, once you do it for a while, once you play for a while, once you do quite a bit of PvP, the netcode really, it becomes second nature. It's super easy. You learn what you need to react to, and then you learn what you need to predict. Like straight swords, you probably need to predict. Heal parries, you need to predict. That kind of thing. But the big weapons, you can just react. Just reaction dodge, that kind of stuff. But this has been a sort of glance into how to invade Yharnam. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's helped, and I hope you'll give it a shot. Even with Return to Yharnam kind of winding down, I would love to see more people putting out some Bloodborne content. Thanks for watching. Later, y'all.